Ethan Hawke doing his best Freddy Krueger impression. Yeah, I'm interested. Black Phone 2 is directed by Scott Derrickson and stars Mason Timms, Ethan Hawke, and Madeline McGraw. When I saw the original Black Phone in theaters, I loved it. I thought it was one of the best movies of the year. I was telling everybody about it. I thought it was so clever. I rewatched it at home with friends and family, and upon second watch, I can't lie, I was kind of bored. I don't think it aged particularly well when you knew what was happening in it. I just don't think it's that type of movie. So going into this sequel and it was announced, I was on the fence with how I felt about it. I was kind of intrigued because of the teaser trailer and where we could possibly go. And then on the other hand, being realistic, I was one of those people like, why are we getting a sequel to Black Phone? This is not the movie that needs a sequel at all. It was a beginning, middle, and end, one and done. The trailer, I think, kind of promises Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy Krueger vibes, and I'm going to get in that in just a little bit, but I am really happy we at least went in a different direction. I was really excited going into this for that reason, one of my most anticipated of the year. And I'm here to report, overall, I think the movie's a mixed bag. There are some things I really love about it, and then some head-scratching decisions that just left me confused. So I split the review up down the middle into positives, negatives. Let's start off with what I liked about the movie. I think the performances, much like the first film, are great. I think Ethan Hawke is really good as the grabber. I think it is an iconic villain at this point, 2 entries in. Mason Timms is the name you'll probably remember. He was the boy in the first Black Phone, but he's not actually the lead, really. Madeline McGraw, his sister from the first film that kind of had a supporting role, you kind of forgot she was in the movie. She's by far the lead of this movie. And I think for the most part, she does a really good job. There are a couple of moments I was kind of questioning the acting, but for her kind of carrying this entire film, I think she does a really good job, and I don't think anybody going into it's going to think that's what she's going to be asked to do. Positive, I will say, I think this movie is significantly scarier than the first film. That first film is not really even a horror movie. It's more of a psychological thriller. This movie is legitimately scary. Again, I always have to preface this so you guys don't get like caught off guard. I don't find movies scary usually, but I know who usually would. Given the fact that a lot of it does take place in the dream world, much like Nightmare on Elm Street. So because of this, everything is fair game. And because of that, they're able to use a lot of different things that make the movie suspenseful, creepy. At least my showing, there were a lot of audible gasps, a couple of, oh shit. Well, I think the movie is scary, at least compared to the first film. So if you're coming from that movie or you want something completely different, know that this movie tonally is a lot different than the first film, but it is kind of more of the same. With the sister having the psychic powers she has from the first film, this movie takes place half in the dream world, half in the real world. When you're in the real world, the movie looks clear and crisp like the first film did, but when you're in the dream world, everything you're looking at has this very 80s grainy tape aesthetic to it, which I thought was a really cool creative choice. Whenever you see that aesthetic, you instantly know you're either in a flashback or you're in the dream world based on where our characters are at, which opens your mind and imagination to the possibilities of what you could possibly experience, again, making this movie effectively creepy. And I think when you're in these moments, the movie is clearly at its best. Now, do I think they fully utilize it to its potential? That's a topic for another day. But the scenes we do get attached to the dream aesthetic and the flashbacks and just the creativity attached to somebody being in a dream world while the people around them are awake, I loved the parts of this movie that have to deal with that. And sticking with the whole dream thing attached to the sister, that's something else I actually enjoyed about this film. Some of the issues I had with the first movie, I'm not gonna lie, are kind of remedied from the sequel. I always wondered in the first film how the sister had psychic capabilities. It just felt like a loose end that was kind of just injected into the movie for continuity purposes because we needed a way to find this guy. But this movie elaborates a lot on the first film's lore and gives you backstory to the grabber and what her powers are and why she has them, what happened in the family prior, and I think all of those things are better to enrich this movie. It makes the world feel more believable, it makes it feel like there's more stakes to what's going on, and it makes you understand as a viewer how some of this stuff could be happening, even though a lot of it is asinine and requires suspension of disbelief. The final positive I have with this movie is almost the entire third act, which the trailer does show a lot of. I actually, unfortunately, saw this trailer. I try to avoid them. But I thought the third act of this movie, when it is heavily invested in the dream world, you get the most of the grabber, you get all of the characters coming together, and you get the final conclusion to this lore that's been built up. I thought that third act was awesome, and I really enjoyed the finale of this movie. And it just gave me everything I wanted going into this type of movie. So I think when you get to the final third of it, you get all the answers you need, you get the wrap up, you get some suspenseful moments, some scares, you get some very creative choices. It was everything I wanted and could have asked for going into the movie. But flipping over to the negatives, I think this movie has massive tonal inconsistency. For me, it felt like whenever you're not in a dream sequence, this movie is kind of just adding filler dialogue to get you to the next one. It's one of those examples where they kind of have a core idea of what they want to do in the form of flashbacks and getting to this guy's world where you can have some of the more effective scares, but it kind of felt like they were doing the same thing over and over again to get there. And I actually sat by someone who agreed with me that this movie was way more dialogue heavy than the first film, or better and worse, because you do get explanation in the form of lore, as I already said, but it gets to a certain point where you're just like, where's the grabber? It's been so long since this guy's even gotten into the film. The grabber is not really a significant part of this movie until about the 1 hour mark, and it's a 2-hour movie. So again, know that going into it, this movie is very heavy on the dialogue and the lore. He takes a back seat. The most obvious thing being, this movie I think is criminally mismarketed. There's going to be a lot of people who go into this movie and are heavily disappointed or pissed off based on the teasers. When I walked into this, I thought this was going to be heavy Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy Krueger vibes. It was going to be like a slasher film, and it is not that at all. This movie is much more of the same, with that on the back half and the dream sequences thrown in. So no, going into it, it's not an entirely different movie. Like if you hated the Black Phone 1, you're probably going to hate this film. And if you love the Black Phone 1, I don't really think there's a guarantee you're going to like this one. In fact, I was talking to somebody next to me after the film and I said, I don't really feel like this was even a Black Phone sequel aside from the lore. It felt more like Sinister. And he completely agreed. This movie feels more like Sinister tonally than it feels like Black Phone, which is not necessarily a bad thing because I love the movie Sinister, but they really were leaning heavily into that grainy tape thing. That's how all of the flashbacks and dream sequences of this movie play, and that's when the movie's at its strongest. With that being said, it does make the movie tonally mishmash, which just makes the movie feel like Black Phone 1 when you're not in it, and then it feels like Sinister when you're in it. But there were large sums of this film where my theater was audibly laughing at the way these kids talked, and things I just felt like completely took me out of the moment when it came to suspense and the stakes at play. It just felt kind of cartoonish, with an added negative being I didn't laugh at any of them, so they were ineffective laughs injected in the suspenseful scenes, and I am a hard no when it comes to that. I want the movie to stick to something tonally. This just feels like one of those movies that purposely injects moments, much like Marvel, just for comedic relief in moments you don't really need it. And the movie is much, much worse for it. You also just don't get enough of the grabber in this, straight up. I mean, when I came to this sequel, I wanted more expansion of his character in particular. While the lore is effective at fleshing out what this world is, you don't get nearly enough of him. A 2-hour movie, like 20-25 minutes of him only. The majority of the best scares and setup in this film are in the teaser trailer, so when you get to them in the movie, you're left a little bit disappointed and you just kind of want a little bit more, because you've seen it before you go into it. And not trying to purposely give you guys dad jokes and puns, but this movie takes place at a youth camp during the winter on a sheet of ice. And it feels fitting because that's about as deep as the plot and the buildup of this movie really is, about as thin as a sheet of ice. This movie gives you answers and expands on the lore of the first film, but it all really circles back to you having to massively suspend your disbelief and just get on board with the imagination this movie requires, because there's really no way any of it ties back together where you leave the movie going, oh yeah, that made sense. Massive exposition dumps and things required to possibly explain why this is happening, how to get out of this, the solution, and seemingly all of the characters just know this. There's really no rhyme or reason for it besides we had visions of it. The movie's almost 2 hours long and I felt it completely. The person next to me kept getting texts, so every once in a while they check their phone. And when I saw the time, I was like, we're only an hour into this? Overall, mixed bag for me. You know, being one of my most anticipated of the year, I wouldn't say I'm disappointed. I enjoyed my time with this, but I think it has massive issues. I do think it's better than the first film, though, after rewatching the first. Not sure when I'll watch it again, but I had a pretty good time with it. Like, comment, subscribe, join me down below. Let me know what you think of the movie if you see it, or what you thought of Black Phone, but I will see you in the next review. Peace.